to the sound. To the sound.
All right, welcome. Okay, let me fix this real quick. Wait, there I am. Hello. So, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the debate I had on the Non Sequitur show today. It was interesting. Didn't get into the details and the complexities of moral theory that usually we'll get into on this particular channel. But I thought it was at least interesting enough where there was a dialogue between Andrew Wilson and Jessica Gill. I wasn't going to do an after show. This is not an after show. I just wanted to talk about maybe a little bit of morality from a believer's point of view, from a non-believer's point of view, because as people know, Jessica Gill is an atheist. Andrew Wilson is a Catholic, an Orthodox Catholic. I'm neither. But I think that a lot of the moral talk is just overwrought with jargon. It's overwrought with the positions that people were adhered to because of personal ideological beliefs that will either cohere with some of their other beliefs or just are ingrained in them because of some kind of upbringing or religious indoctrination. And so I want to have an open hangout tonight. Anybody can join. If I don't expect many people to, if any. I invited one or two, but I think it's probably going to be myself, which is fine. I can manage, but if anybody does want to come in, like what happened the other night, people want to drop by, I did put the link in the live chat and pinned it, so you can drop on in and give me your point of view. But listen to that debate, and just recently, when it comes to moral theory, I've noticed one pervasive thing in almost all the dialogues and almost all the discussions dealing with moral theory. I've noticed one overarching type of question, and that's basically is, what is morality? And it's also what to somebody is a normative action. What is right? What is wrong? What is good? What is evil? Does good and evil even exist? Does right and wrong even exist? To moral statements, state something that has to do with actual ontology. Are they actual moral facts that have to do with any of the objective or subjective? But what it boils down to is, how do we know right from wrong? Why do we have ethics in the first place? And the reality is, the reason why so many of these discussions either A, get derailed, or B, never really go anywhere to reach a conclusion is because there's no right answer to any of these moral questions as far as what philosophical approach to make. Now, in saying that, I realize I am making a moral judgment of some kind. I'm making at least an epistemological judgment, maybe not necessarily a moral judgment, but I'm making an epistemological judgment that we have no way of knowing really what the best moral theory is. It's trial and error. And society for time since began has basically tried different types of things that they thought would be moral or immoral and learned from them whether they are moral or not. But you cannot defer to any specific one moral position on every single moral question. And I've reached that conclusion. I think that probably most people that are moral theorists, which I'm not, I just happen to like moral theory. I think most people have probably realized that you can appeal to more than one moral theory, whether it be a normative or metaethical theory. You don't have to stick with just one, depending on the question being asked. Because again, if there was one perfect moral theory, everybody would have that. Now, the Christians could argue that their moral theory is the best, right? That there's nothing wrong with the Christian moral theory because it's from God, therefore it has to be perfect. No, that's just so not right. But that's what some of them would actually believe, right? How can their moral theory be wrong if it's from an omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient being that knows everything, right? I mean, how can that kind of being be wrong? One, it assumes an all-perfect, all-benevolent being, which I think from the Old Testament is not necessarily the case if God exists. I don't think that the Old Testament God is very moral in many cases. Matter of fact, he's known as a moral monster in many writings. But even if you take that as may, that there's some kind of omnipotent being, The problem is we have no access to that knowledge. Divine command theory, which I think even Andrew, who again is Orthodox Catholic, ascribes to, is predicated on what God knows, and that God knows what's right and wrong, and he basically has given commandments to people. And the very act of abiding by those commandments is what makes it moral. That's how divine command theory usually is looked at. It's a form of what's called ethical subjectivism. Some people will argue it's ethical objectivism. I've seen both, but generally I tend to ethical subjectivism for that. But one, you have to assume that you're getting the knowledge from God correctly. And we've known historically that doesn't seem to happen. We know historically that mankind gets things wrong, even in the most mundane things. Do you think that they should be, responsible enough to be able to interpret God's will and disseminate it out through the masses properly? Because I don't think so. Man is a very highly flawed being. And of course, that every person who ever touches anything that supposedly comes from God is going to put in some kind of their own personal bias, their own personal moral ontology, so to speak. So I wanted to kind of, like I said, have a little hangout, and I just talk on this issue, I guess, until if somebody does come in, that these moral discussions really want to nail people down to one particular point of view, whether it be utilitarianism, whether it be a deontological approach, which is some kind of duty to rule or law. But unfortunately, as I said, you cannot specifically say, oh, I find this to be right or wrong because of the one type of moral theory that I will only hold to. Kimamaki says moral theory is way harder for me to iron out than just moral theory or moral epistemology. Well, yeah, because the moral epistemology is dealing with how do we actually know what is moral, right? I mean, that's a meta-ethical approach. Is sure, we can argue maybe what could be normative if you're given a situation between, running up to somebody and punching them and giving them food. Most people would probably agree that giving them food is the moral good, right? And then somebody's going to say, well, that's just, relativism. Well, no, unfortunately, I disagree, because we're talking about what it means to be moral. And it's not an appeal to popularity. It's not even an appeal to consensus. It's not even an appeal to what everybody thinks. It's in a society. Why do we have morals in the first place? Do you think a society would be more beneficial having somebody go up and punch somebody just for the heck of it, or give them a homeless person food? Let's say it's a homeless person. Would it be more beneficial to society to go up and just punch them, or to give them food, right? We all have this instinctual understanding of morality, and it's very difficult to put into words. This is something that's probably the most difficult thing in moral theory, is because it's so very nuanced. And people will say, what about the grounding? What about, how do you know that's the right thing to do? And the reality is, 9 times out of 10, we're not going to have absolute surety of what our moral actions is. Right? We could even argue that morality doesn't even exist in many cases. To the moral error theorist, moral propositions exist, but they're all false. And people say, well, how can that be? How can, hitting a person, hitting a homeless person be false? It's clearly a moral act to most of us because it shocks our senses. But to the moral theorist, there's no instantiation of wrongness. It's something that exists in the universe, that's wrongness, that you can make that statement fully propositional to where it could even be true. So it's an error. It has to be false because all moral propositions are false. But to like the moral realist, which I tend to, is I do believe there are moral facts. And even to a moral subjectivist, they believe there are moral facts. The problem is that the moral objectivist says that there's at least one moral fact that is true regardless of what somebody else thinks, regardless of their bias, regardless of cultural relativism or historical relativism or anything like that, that there's a specific moral facts that do comport with reality. And those moral facts can either be true or false. And then the moral subjectivist says, well, no, all of them are basically just opinions. I don't take that approach. I don't think it is just opinions. I think there are moral facts of the universe, just like there are nomenological facts, just like the law of gravity, just like force laws. It's like a law of thermodynamics. All these second law of Newton's law. Anything like these nomological laws that exist, we will say are just attributes of the universe. There's something just fundamental about the universe. I mean, why is it that force equals mass times acceleration? it's just what we've described is what we see, and we've described it and formulated it and made it, empirical, made it quantifiable, made it something we can measure. But it's something that we describe the universe as. Why does the universe have that? Well, that's a great question. And that is a very difficult question to answer. Science may not even have the tool to answer something like that. It may be in the realm of philosophy only, right? But when we get into these discussions of morality, they want you to answer those fundamental questions, which, again, nobody really has an answer to. The believer will say they have an answer to it, God, but as I've numerous times explained, I don't think that answers anything about why we have these moral questions or moral laws that do exist. People say, well, you need a lawgiver. No, that's not. You don't need a physics lawgiver to give the law of the second law of thermodynamics or the first law of thermodynamics or any of those laws. I'm trying to remember myself. First law of thermodynamics. I just recalled something on it too the other day. The internal energy is equal to the Q minus W, right? So internal energy equals heat energy minus work. Yeah. See, it's been a while for myself too. But you don't need some kind of prescriptive being to say, hey, this is the way I want it, because we're describing what we're seeing, right? Christians will assume there's some kind of prescriptive being that says this has to be the way it is. This is the way I want this universe to exist. This is the way I want this possible world, this extant possible world to be. Why? Why does it have to be this particular way? Why did God choose this universe to be the way it is? Why did he make speed of light c, right? Why did he make c a very specific, number? Why did he make the fine structure constant the way it is? I mean, he could have done things differently, right? And to say that he couldn't would be saying that the universe had to be the way it is for us to exist. And there could be no other way, which seems to be limiting the power of God if he exists. But even if these moral facts didn't exist, I mean, if you look at the moral non-cognitivist approach, they believe that moral facts don't exist. They believe that morality and moral statements don't express something that's true or false, but basically more along the lines of either a feeling or a directive. If I say stealing is wrong, then it means don't steal. It's a directive. If I say stealing is wrong, turn to motivist, it's, stealing is bad. It's boo, booyah, boo yes, or yeah no, or yeah yes, boo no. But these are all different ways to look at morality. I don't know how anybody could ever say this must be the way it is. Morality must be looked at emotivism. Morality must be looked at from a cognitivist approach, because there's so many different questions that are out there that I think can only be answered by trying to appeal to a specific line of moral theory. Kawasa 5000 Juan says, been a while. I can't stay. Got to go, but have a drink on me, man. I will do that. Thank you. I got Kano got a bottle of Seagram 7 apple, something like that, and I haven't tried it yet. It smells really good. I guess you're supposed to put it in mixer, but I don't have. But maybe I just might try a little bit tonight. I got the place to myself, so I'm streaming. But thank you, Kawasa. I appreciate that. Let me know after the fact that after you watch this, let me know what you think. Chemo says there is seems to be so many approaches to morality before we get into the ontology. There is, and again, without more epistemology, the ontology really doesn't have much meaning, because we have to be able to know why it is we are believing what we believe, or at least have some reasons to. But let me ask you, Chemo. And again, hey, Chemo, why don't you come on in, man? I got it pinned up there. Come on in. Be easier to talk to you face to face, so to speak. I just got a message from Jessica. By the way, if you're watching, Jessica, thank you very much for the debate. I think it went exceptionally well. I told her, look, the fact that she didn't let him get under her skin was just a win into itself. So if you haven't watched the debate yet, go watch it on the Non Sequitur Show. I should probably tell her to come by my channel. If she's here, one sec. Come by my channel if free. There we go. All right. Okay. So, but let me ask you this, Kimamaki. somebody that came on the other day, Christian Idealist, came on, and he reminded me of fictionalism. I mean, I know what fictionalism is, but he kind of reminded me a little bit about what are some of the virtues of appealing to a fictionalist approach. And I don't subscribe to fictionalism, but I do get the appeal to it. But let me ask you, let's assume that we ascribe to a nominalist point of view when it comes to numbers and set theory, such that we don't subscribe to some kind of mathematical Platonic realism. We don't believe that numbers exist. We don't believe sets exist. Now, I've already said that I believe that triangles don't exist and squares don't exist and circles don't exist, but not for the same reason. They're not because of non-Platonic forms. It's because of reality and the fine grainness of the universe, you cannot have a perfect circle. They're theological. I guess the best word would be hypothetical constructs. There's no such thing as a perfect triangle. They don't exist, right? That perfect shape doesn't exist. What we have are similes to what would be a perfect triangle, just because our universe doesn't allow for them, right? So somebody could say, well, yeah, triangles don't exist unless you mean in the broad sense. Well, yeah, it has three sides and they are equal as far as our senses can show us, but we also know that mathematically that object doesn't actually exist ontologically. Same thing with a dot matrix printer. You got a bunch of dots everywhere, right? And you makes a picture and you say, okay, there's a picture there, but that picture only exists because of the dots. That'd be more of a mereological approach, right? Or especially mereological nihilist approach. Does that picture really exist, or is it just something that's comprised of those individual dots that are put in some kind of recognizable pattern that makes it exist? But does that picture itself have any ontological presence? Well, it really doesn't. Just like, a hallucination has no ontological presence. A dream has no ontological presence. There's nowhere that those things do exist, but we talk about them as if they have existence. So let me ask Kawamaki, if we didn't have Platonic realism, if the number 2 didn't exist, would it change anything we do in mathematics? No, it clearly wouldn't. I mean, there are some arguments for, Quine's indispensability theorem and things of that nature about the ability to use numbers in science and formulas. But really, for practicality, for utilitarian perspective, if we said, numbers don't exist, they're abstract, but they don't really have any kind of existence in any kind of sense, would it change anything of how we do mathematics? And I'll let you mull it over a second. Autistic says, when I get myself some makeup and figure out how to wear my new wig, I'd love to come up with you. Absolutely. And I hope you're feeling better. I know Autistic Show was not feeling well. Told her to go to bed, but she don't listen to me. She says she's comfortable, but I did tell her get rest. But I do hope you feel better. I know what that's like. Not feeling good. It sucks. It really sucks. But once again, thank you for the super chat, Kawasa. I appreciate it. Anybody else want to, like I said, anybody else want to come in? So I think you would agree, though, that nothing would really change. And so why would it be any different in moral theory? Let's assume there are no moral facts. Let's assume either you're a more cognitivist, where moral facts don't express anything propositionally, or let's assume that you're a fictionalist and you just don't think morals exist at all. They're I hate to see the way they're illusionary. It's not really illusionist approach, but basically they're just useful fictions is a good way to put it, right? We talk about them because they have utility, but they're just useful fictions. There's no such thing in the universe that makes a moral fact the way it is, which again, I don't agree with. I think there are things in the universe that make moral facts the way they are. But assume that fictionalism is the case. And now there are different types of fictionalism. The two most prevalent, I think, and the probably most common are we talked about it a little bit the other day. Instrumentalist, fictional instrumentalism, which basically is that morals have utility. We can say, hey, don't go do this, whether it be a law that prescribes that and says, look, you are prohibited from doing this, right? You're prohibited from doing this by law. Laws generally all prohibit something. I don't know of any actual criminal law that allows for something. It actually mostly prohibits, right? It says what you can't do. But let's assume that there is no actual moral fact of the matter that's true and false. Would it change anything in society? Would people being out there going, to beat up a homeless person as opposed to feed them? Would people actually be doing the purge if we allowed for that? The instrumentalists would, say, well, no. I mean, still, morals are fiction, but we still use them. And the other one would be metafictionism, which is basically that morals don't exist, but they exist in the confines of a fictional framework. So, and I could be getting this a little bit wrong. I haven't really looked at this in a while, but let's assume we have like a being called Superman, right? We all know Superman does not exist. It's a fictional character. So if I say Superman can fly, is that a moral truth or not a moral truth? I'm sorry. Is that a statement of truth? Well, it's false in the sense that there's no such being as Superman, right? So Superman can't fly because he doesn't exist. But in the confines of the fictional world, of the Superman world, Superman can fly. So metafictionalism would, I think it's metafictionalism would allow for something like that. And by the way, if you're a moral theorist, please let me know if I got that butchered. Most of this stuff is just how I view these things. It's not what I read in the literature, but it's just how I view them, and it could be completely wrong. And it's kind of based on some of the things I read clearly, but moral literature is very difficult to read. Let's just put it that way. But again, would it change anything as far as society? And I don't think that it would. So if that's the case, what do we have morality for in the society? What's the reason? It's because of social cohesion, for us to get along. That's really the basis behind morality. Is we are sentient moral agents and we have to get along with each other. We're not just brute animals. We all have bodily autonomy. We all have the wants and desires of individuals that are people with some kind of will, not necessarily like libertarian free will, but we all have will. And we all have to recognize that where our will ends, somebody else's begins. And there's a pushing on that. That's all everybody in societal bubbles. As my friend Brittany Simon would say, living in your bubble, as you push to extend, the things that you want to do, it may inhibit somebody else from what they want to do. And that's all of social interactions, I think. Autistic says it's the stress of harassment of ableism. Yeah. And I'm sorry that you are faced with ableism. I know a lot of people that have, both physical and mental challenges, to say the least. And I don't mean that pejorative. I mean, they've gone their whole life with some kind of issue they've had to tackle. And I find it disgusting when people go after people because of those limitations. I don't like, however, when people go too far and say that every statement is somehow invoking ableism. Now, I just read something the other day, Autistic Shell, and let me ask your opinion on this, because I know that you do talk about this topic, or you're very much into this particular topic about ableism, and you know my view on it. And again, my view is that if people with disabilities should not be mocked for that. However, there are people that I think maybe have mental issues when, as far as things that cause harm to people, that might be a different story. I mean, flat Earth, clearly I mock, and clearly I think that most flat earthers do have some sense of, or do have some kind of mental issue. However, until it becomes super prevalent, like, flat Earth Jesus, I can't have on, because his mental defect is so great that I couldn't in good conscience have him on. But I'll have somebody like Jeranism on, who I think is a Poe anyways. I think he's just completely, I think he knows the earth is round. I think he doesn't care. I think he's just lying to people. He's the ultimate grifter on that. Well, let me ask you, Autistic Show. So just recently I read something on, do you guys remember way back in the day, there was a podcast called Bible Reloaded, and it was with Hugo and Jake, and Hugo became Hannah, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's right. Was it Jake that became Hannah, or Hugo? Someone remind me. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was Hugo. Wasn't it? But anyways, I guess they had a falling out recently, and I guess it was over something that I think it was Jake said about ableism, where what was it he said? I don't want to misquote him. Do you guys remember, do you remember what I'm talking about? Autistic. What was it that Jake said? Um, but it was really benign. I wish I knew exactly what it was because it was really benign. Basically, I don't think at all he was trying to be ableist at all. But I think that when somebody is super sensitive to it, they'll try to take anything out of context to promote this persecution they need for that. And I know autistic's not like that at all. But I wonder if I think it was Hugo, yeah. And I wish I could maybe see if I can find out what it was. Hugo and Jake Abel. Let me see if I can find this real quick. It's bugging me. Because I just was looking this up. I wasn't actually. It was something I went on my way to look up. It just happened to come across something I was reading. Oh my goodness, good grief. It's so funny. I guess they used to work at McDonald's together too, and they were very close. And I guess, Jake supported Hannah the entire time she was transitioning. Man, I don't remember what it was, and I feel bad. But anyways, the point being is that it seemed like a really innocuous statement. It didn't seem like anything worthy of, getting all upset about, and to break up, that long-term friendship over what Hannah just, for some reason took umbrage with and thought that, Jake was being an ableist. I mean, it just seems silly to me, because if you're going to find outrage on everything and you think you have to be supported 100% by everyone in your life, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You're going to just alienate yourself. So does anybody know what I'm talking about? I'm not, dude, I'm serious. I'm not pulling this out. Just my derriere here. I just wish I remember what he said. I'm going to the Reddit, but it's so long ago. I don't think I can find it. Anyways, I don't even know what it was. See, my memory span isn't what it used to be. I'm sure somebody will leave me in the comment section what it was that Jake supposedly said that was so horrific that there's a charge of ableism. Yeah, as Jared says, the people are silly, especially for those looking for offense, whatever. Jared, you can come on in, by the way. Link is in the top there. But yeah, I think that people do go out of the way to be offended nowadays. It seems to be the social norm. It's always been that way a little bit. It's called persecution versus privilege. It's been in the cornerstone of intersectionalities from as long as I can remember. It started with multiculturalism, then it moved to political correctness, then it used intersectionality, and now it's gender ideology and DEI and all that stuff. So, their channel became Hannah and Jake. Yeah, but this was about a month ago. This is fairly recent, and I think they're not even doing a podcast together. Hannah and Jake, yeah. So it had to be Hugo that became Hannah. And I remember, I had Jake on. Jake was on the Non Sequitur show before. Jake was on with me when we had Jesse Lee Peterson on. Do you remember that? Yeah. So I was called a beta. I got called beta by Jesse Lee Peterson. I mean, come on, that's awesome. How many of you got called beta by Jesse Lee Peterson? Oh, no worries. Okay. Yeah. If you're on the porcelain throne, stay there. Just in case your camera accidentally comes on. Don't want that. Yeah. I mean, okay. Like when it comes to the R word, again, shoot the messenger, but whatever. I think it's context. The word itself isn't ableist, depending on usage, right? I mean, if I'm directing it to somebody, then that's a slight, that's pejorative, that's an insult, especially to somebody who does have cognitive disabilities or things of that nature. That's just wrong on every level, right? I think it's very offensive. But But if I'm using it in the context of some other thing where I say, well, the Venturi meter in the middle of a Venturi meter, it has a convergence of the inner wall of the pipe that allows for retardation of the water, or the water retard through it. So you have a increase of kinetic energy while you have a drop in potential energy based upon Bernoulli's equation. That's perfectly fine, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But there are people that got so triggered by that wording, in engineering, that you can't, for some reason, no, you can't say that. Well, yeah, I can, because that's the word to use. That's what it means in that domain of discourse. It has nothing to do with mental facilities. It has nothing to do with cognitive function. It has to do with slowing down of the water, of the medium. So when you're talking about fluid theory and something is retarded or restricted, it means just that. It means a restricted flow. Retarded flow means restricted flow. It has nothing to do with cognitive function. Just like master slave for a relay has nothing to do with anything to do with, slavery in itself. It has to do with electronics. And so I don't see the need to change our terminology just because there are certain people out there for some strange reason want to have offense to something with no offense given, right? If I'm talking about, retardation of water through an orifice in a Venturi meter, why would somebody take offense to that? I mean, if the only thing that could take offense to that maybe would be the water, but the water doesn't have cognitive function, It just says, yes, that's fun, as long as it's not used an insult. I agree with you. The word is triggering, but most people don't understand there's a difference. I agree. Where we probably would disagree is maybe, I think people can say anything they want as far as those words. However, I do believe there's societal repercussions. I think there's repercussions from people use certain terminologies against certain people, right? Yeah, understandably so. And so do I think they should be banned in their speech? No. I am not a free speech absolutist, but I am somebody who believes very strongly in freedom of speech. And I would probably be as closest to moral absolutism as you can get with actually being more absolutist. There's just one or two things about it I can't quite fully agree with, but I know a lot of people that are more absolutist. I know like Ozymandias Ramses II is a more absolutist. Not more absolutist, First Amendment or free speech absolutist. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not a more absolutist either. I tend to more universalism, but whatever. All right. And by the way, sidetrack. Before I went live, I got to tell you, I was setting this all up, and you know how you get videos like you see before you set this up and everything comes on, it kind of promotes things to you. I saw a promotion for the song Square Hammer by Ghost, only they had Ozzy Osbourne singing rather than Tobias Forge. Now, I love Tobias Forge. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge Ghost fan. But I got to tell you, had Ozzy Osbourne originally sang or ever does sing for Ghost, because this was like, using his voice sampling or, voice AI. If Ozzy Osbourne ever sang for Ghost, it would match perfectly. The song was brilliant. As a matter of fact, if I heard that rendition of Square Hammer with Ozzy before I had heard of the actual song with Tobias Forge, I probably would have gone, this is amazing. This is great. Do I like the song better with Tobias Forge? Yeah, but probably because it's just, his song. And I just happen to like Ghost. But I mean, it was so good. So if you guys haven't heard that, check it out, man. Yeah, but back to what I was saying, again, it all isn't in context, right? It really is in context. Hey, Dan the Machine. The ones that cry in offense on behalf of the people who don't care about the words. Yeah, and by the way, come on in, Dan. Link to join is above there. And I have to actually bring somebody in so that nobody can just drop in random. That's what they want. I mean, I could. You have to let me know who you are first. But I absolutely agree with you. It's so funny because you'll see people feigning moral outrage on behalf of somebody else because they want to feel better about themselves. They want to feel like they have some kind of empowerment. It's the person who is not being offended. They don't care one way or another, but the person who's expressing this moral outrage because of their own personal view of morality, is the one causing more of the problems, and probably even causing distress to the person that the insult was even directed to, it's probably sometimes, and I've seen it be the case with a person who was white knighting or defending, actually made it more difficult for the person they were trying to defend, because they were making the situation far worse, especially when the individual by which the insult was directed to wasn't actually offended, you know? Like, for example, in the debate between Jessica Gill and Andrew Wilson, I was watching both live chats, and I got to tell you, the live chat and the non-sequitur show were much nicer. You guys were much nicer. His chat had about 1,300 people watching, and they were brutal. But I mean, it's to be expected, right? Nobody took offense to that. I didn't take offense to what they were saying about me. Their opinion of me, I think, changed a little bit throughout the debate. You know, at first it was like, hey, who's this, old white guy? Then they're like, oh, well, Steve added a little context to the discussion. Some people were like, oh, moderation shouldn't get involved. And people know in non sequitur show, I get involved in the discussions. That's the show, right? I'm not modern day debate. If you want modern day debate and just go and not have any moderation, then there you go. I don't run it that way. It's different style. One isn't better than the other. It's just different. And towards the end, they were like, hey, you know what? Maybe Steve should have debated, been the one debating. But I mean, it's still, I think Jessica did really well, but they liked the fact that I had a context. I know that Andrew appreciated my moderation, he said I could probably even moderate blood sports. And I appreciate that. Not my first rodeo, but nobody took offense to anything, right? Jessica wasn't offended. And I think that was a big win for her, because one of Andrew's thing is to get under somebody's skin, whether it be intentional or not. I don't think he really tried too hard. I really think he held back, and I appreciated that. When he debated Matt Dillahunty, he was trying to get under Matt's skin, and did. Matt walked out. Matt said, you know what, take your parents' fee and whatever. He was done. And I think that was a big loss for Matt, actually. The fact that Jessica hung in there, didn't get triggered, didn't get emotional, didn't let it bother her, I think was such a massive win. And I think she's going to be popular, and she's going to be invited to a lot of different debates. I've been on notice that, I might be more interested in going on certain panels. We'll see. I'm not in the league of Destiny or Vosh by any stretch of imagination. Both have been on my show. Both have been on Non Sequitur show. But they're much more into rhetoric. And I think that would really, I would be out of my league because both of them know. Vosh studied sociology, and he uses it to weaponize against people. That's what he does. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that he's good at it. Whether you agree with Vosh or not, he's good at it because he's educated on how to debate and use things about society and things about philosophy and things about psychology and sociology to his advantage. Destiny, I think, just wants to win a debate. He's all over the place, and I'm not trying to talk crap about Destiny at all. Destiny seemed like a nice guy. He was cordial when he came on the Non Sequitur show. But it always seems to me like he's really just about winning the debate. It's a lot of sophistry. And that's why I've never wanted to, I wouldn't be able to compete in a debate with either one of them, but I would be able to maybe talk about certain topics with them, but I know it'd be very competitive, and that's not the route that I want to go. Right. And I don't know anything about politics when it comes to Marxism and value, labor value theory, anything like that, or, what happened in the Soviet Union in the 80s, that's not my thing. I've had minor discussions about them. I've listened to those discussions. I would get wrecked when it came to discussions on geopolitics and sociological issues of those kinds of natures. It wouldn't be for me. XI Music says, I like their first album. Isn't it a completely different band now except for the front guy? Yes. Tobias Forge had issues with the original members of Ghost, and they tried to sue him, but they lost because it was Tobias Forge's group. It was his project, and they knew what they were getting themselves into. They just happened to get real popular, right? The Ghouls happened to get real popular. And now he just puts people in the group that want to play, I guess. I still have a regular lineup, but like Dave Grohl, we know, played drums as a Ghoul in at least one of the albums, or at least one of the songs. So, a lot of people like the anonymity too, right? Sure, the original lineup didn't realize how popular they would get, and nobody even knew who they were, right? And a lot of people didn't even know who Tobias Forge was because he played Papa Emeritus. But as they grew popularity, they kind of wanted their names out there more, and I don't blame them. But when you get somebody like Dave Grohl, who everybody knows, he's made it big with the Foo Fighters. Who cares? He'll put on a ghoul mask and he'll drum and not care if anybody knows who it is. He just likes the music and the show. And I liked all their albums. I really do like all of Ghost stuff. Now some albums are better than others, but oh man, some of their old stuff is just chef's kiss, just so musical. And there's a guy out there named Trey. What's his name? Dang it, Trey. Anyways, you can't remember his name. I'm sorry, Trey. I watch his stuff, and he reviews like songs that people send in, and he gives away guitars, and he does music reviews, and he's brilliant. I mean, the guy is just absolutely brilliant. And he made a song called "The Gaudy Cross," which I'm not even bullshitting. I'm not. I'm telling you straight up. The first time I heard that song, I thought it was Ghost. He got me. Trey Xavier, is that his name? Trey Xavier? Oh, Trey Xavier. But it got me. It sounded just like Ghost. He made a video about how Ghost made a song, and it was, oh my God, it was the best thing I ever watched. I think it's one of my favorite all-time videos because it's so spot on of how Ghost would write a song, and it came out to be exceptionally good. I mean, I don't know why Ghost doesn't play that song in their set. It's so brilliant. XC Music. I don't need to see another flat earth debate on MDD. I will have flat earth debates every so often, probably on the Non Sequitur show, but as you said, they're so burned out and there's just so nothing new and it's just so repetitive. It's strictly for entertainment value. We all know the flat earthers are either pose or just god awful stupid. There's just no in between. The average flat earther is not your run of the mill normal person. They are just either really, 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 really stupid, or they're just playing a part. I don't really see too much middle ground. I'm not trying to have black and white fallacy, but I really don't see too much middle ground. And so I don't know what else there really is to debate. If I have Reds on, who, Reds Red are more than happy to come on, but who against whom? I mean, unless Eric Debye wants to come on, I've already had Jeranism on and Jeranism got wrecked. Yeah, I also play on Queens of the Stone Age album, and Queens of the Stone Age actually is a local group for me. Queens of the Stone Age came from those Crooked Vultures, and they started in a bar that I used to go to called the Hood in Palm Desert with Josh Holmes and what's his other name? Josh Holmes and Jesse. Oh man, I'm telling you, my mind is not what it was. I want to ask Alexa, but I don't even. Alexa, who are the members of those Crooked Vultures?
The current members of Vultures United are David
No.
Jr.
Alexa, stop. See, she can't. Alexa, stop. She doesn't answer my questions right. You hear that? Alexa, who are the original members of those Crooked Vultures?
Them Crooked Vultures was a rock band formed in 2009 in Los Angeles. The band's original members included Dave Grohl, John Paul Jones, and Josh Homme.
Josh Homme, but who was the other one? Jesse, or maybe it was Queens of the Stone. Alexa, what were the original members to Queens of the Stone Age?
Josh Homme, the band's founder, was one of the original members of Queens of the Stone Age. The band has seen a number of personnel changes over the years, with Troy Van Leeuwen, Michael Schumann, Dean Fertitta, and John Theodore being current members. Did that answer your question?
No, but that's okay. It was just, what's his name? Jesse something or other. I can't even remember. But anyways, they're from Palm Desert over here. They're from my area. Not really Los Angeles. It's actually, they're from Riverside County. But anyways, sidetrack, huh? But let's get back to moral theory. I could talk about music a lot too. And one of these days, I really do want to have somebody come on who knows music theory and just have a discussion on music theory, because I find music theory to be fascinating, man. I love classical music. I love listening to how music is actually, written and made and scored, and how you put the drum line in, how you put the bass in, and, how you do the chord progressions. It's really fascinating. And anything that contains the devil's triad. There you go. Wait, yeah, there you go. Devil's triad. Because you got your fourth, and then you got your fifth, and but actually, what is it? You have your third, your major third, fourth. But the triad is between the fourth and the fifth, isn't it? Isn't the triad? Because the fourth sounds good, the fifth sounds good, but isn't the devil's triad between those two? I see. I have to look that up. Anyways, let's go back to something I know a little bit better, maybe moral theory. So anyways, that's kind of my view on belief versus non-belief morality. Well, I didn't even get in touch with the belief very much, but it's basically that the non-believer can have morals just like a believer. The non-believer can have moral theories that he can appeal to in order to say what is right or wrong. Doesn't need a God to do it. Anybody who says you need God for morality, I think doesn't know what they're talking about. Even most Christians will recognize that atheists can have morality. They'll argue that if God didn't exist, there would be no moral lawgiver. But the issue with that I have is, if God didn't exist, would we all be lawless? Well, clearly no. We still have a society. If God literally disappeared right now, and see, this is what I hate about dealing with Christians who will not do hypotheticals. This came up in the debate, actually, about hypotheticals. And we all agree that people that avoid hypotheticals don't want to tackle the hard questions. Now, again, I'm not saying it's absolute. There are some hypotheticals that are just not, they're just loaded questions, and you shouldn't be answering them, right? But in general, if somebody's having a dialectic and they really are trying to get to the crux of the matter, trying to have what's called a synthesis, then there's nothing wrong with hypotheticals. And if you cannot entertain what it'd be like that if God just vanished right now, then you're not going to be a really honest interlocutor. I can at least imagine what it'd be like to have a God or not a God. I can imagine what would happen now if I didn't have like the law of excluded middle in classical logic. There's other logics out there that don't use it. I can imagine what it'd be like to have the law of non-contradiction go away. You would end up with paraconsistent logic. You would end up with, things that don't end up at principle of explosion. But you could make a working model, a working logical model that doesn't have law of non-contradiction or law of excluded middle. They're called truth gaps and truth gluts. And you can literally make a model that does this. Okay, I can hypothesize what it'd be like not to have that. I can even hypothesize what it'd be like to have non-identity, right? It's a little more difficult, but there are ways of doing it. Which is all of x equals x, which is a fundamental axiom. But if somebody said, "Hey, Steve, what if we didn't have that?" I could say, "Okay, well, let's hypothesize this." I could say, "Well, I wouldn't even know what that would mean," and in most cases, probably people don't. But there are some ways I can look at it where I would at least try to answer the question, if at least to have a relative idea of what it'd be like if we didn't have identity, if something wasn't itself. But when a Christian says, "Well, I can't imagine that, God must exist," okay, but again, God. Let's say God's existing right now. He's somewhere in the universe. Let's say he's all over. He permeates the universe or just exists in his own little realm that is isolated. Some kind of theistic personalism, that he's just isolated away from the rest of the universe as some kind of great demerge or being or whatever. If God went poof, somebody was saying, "Well, if God went poof, all of reality would go poof with it." Well, now you're entailing something that's not in the question. Now you're just applying your own bias. And now you're just applying some axiom that I didn't give you. My axiom is that the universe can be self-sustaining, and God disappeared. How would that change morality? Just like if we had fictionalism, how would it change morality? If morals didn't exist, let's say even error theory was the case, where all moral facts are false, they are moral facts, but they're just happen to be all false, would it change how we operate day to day in a normative way? No, of course not. There's still other things out there that prohibit us from doing that. And even if they didn't, even if they were allowed, even if somebody says, "Hey, it is now allowable to go do some immoral act," it's now allowable to go up and punch homeless people. Most people wouldn't do it. Why? Because they have some kind of innate sense of morality. I don't need a law to tell me that I shouldn't go around punching homeless people, right? Because that would be something we all know innately would be wrong. I don't want to, if there was a law that says, "Hey, you can go around and kick babies now," just for fun, which is the canonical thing again for objective morality, is that you shouldn't, torture babies for fun, or even innocent people for fun. Torture is bad, basically, for fun. And if they said, hey, look, you can kick babies now, how many people would be going around doing that? I'm not saying that you wouldn't have a sociopath here and there, but the vast majority of us have some kind of instilled consciousness, or conscious, that knows it's innately wrong to do those moral acts. I don't need a God to tell me that. And if God ceased to exist, it wouldn't change anything of how I behave. My morality would not change contingent upon the information that God no longer exists. Now, of course, assume that he exists in the first place, or if he didn't exist. But to the Christian, how would his morality change is a real question. If according to divine command theory, what is moral is acting upon what God commands, right? It's the action. The action what makes it moral. Kind of like there's people have talked about rule utilitarianism and act utilitarianism. Rule utilitarianism is something that is moral based upon if it conforms to a particular rule, and act if it conforms to a particular action that leads to some kind of consequence. But if the Christian God disappeared, what would that Christian appeal to? What then moral theory would he have to divert to? Because most Christians, a long time Christians, haven't really thought much about their own personal morality. They haven't developed their own moral code. What they have done is deferred their moral understandings to some kind of divine being and hope that that being is telling them the right information and that they're getting their morals right. We all know that doesn't work very well. We all know that doesn't work very well. But I think a good question to be asking is to the theist is, what moral theory would you then apply if you didn't have God to tell you what to do? If God ceased to exist? And why would we not see everybody's going out to do what they want? I know, was it Dostoevsky and it was Peterson and other people have, trying to run the argument, well, if we didn't have God, there's no value, there's no morality, people would be out there, doing what they want because there's no punishment for their actions. And I think that's a horrific line of thinking. It was the brothers Kasparov. But one of them was like, he wanted to give his ticket back because he was just like, I'm out of this. I'm a psychopath. I don't deal with any of this stuff. It's okay to murder if I want to. I think, but that's not the norm, right? That's not the average person. And so the average person is not going to change how they are merely because their deity that has given them these commandments no longer exist. But let's see here. Dan says, you're too shy to jump on stream every time. Okay, that's cool. What you're saying is we can have applied ethics without even hearing of metaethics. Yes, absolutely. And that's a great way to put it, right? Because you got metaethics, normative ethics, and then you got applied ethics. And applied ethics, we all have to utilize every time we interact with somebody. We all have to interact. We all have to have our own understanding of what we can and cannot do, what is permitted and what is not permitted, not just by the legal sense, but by just an innate sense of morality for applied ethics, right? And people can say, well, that's all subjective, but it's discoverable. I don't think it is subjective. Well, some of it certainly is, right? But there are some things that are probably objectively the case that all societies have concluded that are just moral wrongs. And I think that's because that objective fact happens to be an objective fact of the universe. And again, that gets a little bit more about categorical imperatives versus hypothetical imperatives. And I don't think there's even a way to attribute any single moral theory to account for every single moral quandary when it comes to applied ethics. Every single question out there is not one specific moral theory that one size fits all, right? And I certainly don't think that everything is objective or everything is subjective. It is a mix of things. And I certainly don't think that one moral theory encompasses everything to explain what we would do for categorical imperatives. And that's what Kant would talk about. And that's much more difficult. It may not be the case. We have ability to do that. I don't even know. That goes to more epistemology. But I do think for hypothetical imperatives, which to me really encapsulate what we mean by what we are trying to accomplish in society being goal-driven, that is perfectly fine to have that approach. And so if we want to have objective morality in that regard, yeah, good to go. Gary, you're late, but that's okay. But anyways, I got to wrap this up. I didn't want it to go very long. Just a quick, hang out with you guys. And then, I'll do them earlier so people can kind of join in. I get everybody's shy tonight, so it is what it is. But I'll have another open hangout next week probably, and then invite whoever wants to come on. I didn't invite anybody this particular time. That's probably why. And plus, my people are saying my notifications aren't going out sometimes. I don't know. Weird. So, but anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and be sure you go watch the debate on the Non Sequitur Show with Jessica Gill and Andrew Wilson. Let me know what your thoughts are on that, and I'll catch you later on. Peace, guys.